Super excited. I'd like to first thank the MEF for inviting me here today and being able to be part of this. As you're going to hear, NAS is near and dear to my heart, and I'm a big fan and proponent of it, so we'll talk a little bit about that today. Before we start though, what I want to do is just give a little bit of background. I know many of you in the room, but some don't know me. I've got about a 35-year time in networking, in telecom, and done everything from NOC services, field tech services, racking and stack routers, all the way through sales engineering, and then finally in product. And I've been able to see a unique purview across the environment of where we have needs and where we're going. And then one of the interesting things that at least I find is that I came from a telecom home. So both my parents worked for phone companies, my mom for Bell Company and my dad for GTE. So they were rival phone companies. But what I found interesting at dinner conversation was that they really had to work together. Because we don't always have the luxury of having all the sites in a single footprint. So they had to interop, and this is back in the TDM, say, in Sonnet days, right? We passed OANM, telemetry, and we really didn't care whether it was a first, middle, or last mile. We tended to lose our way a little bit with Ethernet. They weren't really the Bell core standards that we're used to, but MEF came in and really helped us out with carrier Ethernet, really solved a lot of problems there. And then flash forward or flash back a couple years ago, about 3 years ago, I started on my NAS journey with Verizon Business. And I gave a speech just kind of debuting what my concepts on NAS were and where we should be going. And Pascal and Kevin actually were in the audience and stopped me afterwards and said, hey, can we show you our deck about what our blueprint is and where our roadmap is? And I was really excited to see that we were right in sync with each other. It was amazing to see that two different groups came together and were able to talk about where we want to go with the future, which is where I am here now. So this diagram I like to use a lot because if you go back, say about 10 years ago, networking was much simpler, right? We were in the MPLS days, still in the heyday, a lot of hub and spoke networks, where customers would take all their MPLS private networking back to a central data repository, right? Some site, maybe a DR site. And then you had your internet access through there. And like I said, it was fairly simple. Circuits were simple. And then all of a sudden you had customers that had maybe some managed devices on the ends, maybe a managed firewall. But then these SD-WAN guys came out, right? And they started out innovating us operators. They started talking about application visibility, application control, right? And then you stack on the SSE side, the security side, and now you've got this really complicated and convoluted networking throughput, right? And I know you can't see the picture here, but in that picture, what we've got going on is it's now a new environment of ubiquitous access, whether it's public, private access, whether it's broadband, wireline, wireless with fixed wireless access. It shouldn't matter, and it doesn't matter on how you connect to the network, right? Embedded application visibility and control needs to be in there as well. Right? I heard one of the gentlemen speak earlier about how a lot of folks think about NAS still as that consumption model. That's not what it's all about, right? It's about being able to bridge the gap from the edge all the way up in through the cloud and to the cloud workload. And really all this complexity that's here with customers really drives it to that piece, right? They really need to understand that in their simple terms, they really work on their business, but for them, they've got users, sites, and devices that need to securely connect up in through a cloud, right, over to their workload and back and forth. All those pieces have to come together. They have to be seamless to them. They have to be able to understand what's going on and get that visibility of it. And where I get challenged is where I've heard some of the customers try to do this in a DIY environment, where they actually go together and they'll cobble together an SD-WAN, maybe security piece. They'll go through several different service providers to pull together their solution. And next thing you know, instead of having one orchestrator model that they were promised, they've got 4, 5, 6 different portals. And now the customer is left to look at these underlays and overlays and these integrated security pieces and find out how that makes sense, where the insights are, how to work on their workloads, and they're challenged being able to put it together. They may get an information or something that comes up from the application side of the house, but they don't understand how that relates to the network itself and which pieces. So to me, when you bring NAS together, you got to have that all-encompassing piece, which is why we'll talk a little bit later about a single pane of glass and why that's really so important for customers. All right. In my next slide, I know we're having some technical difficulties here, but we'll keep going here. So really what we talk about is where is our NAS today? And one of the things I did look at when I started looking at the industry and talking to folks, I'd hear a lot about NAS and unification, but when I asked to see your description, your service definition descriptions, what I kept seeing, and we were guilty of it too, we hand the customer a stack of service definitions. Here, you bought 13 products, here's 13 definitions. It's the way we've always been selling these services, right? Now you come back and I challenged my team and said, define a single service description that encompasses all these services. Now you don't have to buy them all, but if you do, there's a synergistic effect. Put them on one single contract, not multiple contracts, right? And being able to build these bundles. So, being like we all do, I took a page out of the SD-WAN vendor's playbook and built site types, t-shirt sizes, real simple stuff. And started talking to customers about their business outcomes. And it really helped them understand NAS because now they're able to pull together their business outcomes of what they want all together with these site types, and they can move their sites between a small, medium, large, depending upon who their users are, right, what their applications are, and what their specific needs are. We then bundle that into flexible commercial models, so both as the drink services and then traditional type service pricing to really pull that together. And then, as I mentioned, the single pane of glass is huge. Being able to see the insights there. And what we're able to do is tie analytics. So we'll talk a little about AI later, but we were able to pull together these data lakes, take this information and get actionable AI ops inside the portal itself that helps customers understand predictive nature of pieces, right? What's gonna fail before it fails. Then tying it in that same single pane of glass to things like being able to monetize services. They can buy services from the portal. They can even, through our NAS Cloud Manager, I heard this earlier today, people were talking about some of the cloud challenges that we've got there. The customers were able to take that data flow from their network up into the cloud providers. Not just stop at the front door like a lot of the cloud connections do, but drop it right in their workload. They're then able to also interconnect their cloud workloads as well, or even now with their repatriation from the cloud, we're seeing some customers do that. They're able to put that back in the data center. So it's a cloud-first world, and your NAS solution needs to tie that all together, and that allows you to then sell other services to these customers. So let's talk about some of these customer outcomes. We're not seeing a display, but in that left box, it's kind of hard to read, but these are a bunch of verticals that we have here. And if you build your NAS correctly, you're able to enable these customer outcomes and flex it. The way I think about it, I'm kind of a nerd. I do Lego building blocks, right, and other stuff. But the modularity that you get, I challenged my team and said, look, when we go out to a customer, you don't know if they're going to want a sailboat or a rocket ship or a space car, right, something. Our solutions need to be flexible and modular and extensible to go up and down. So we'll talk a little bit about some use cases I've got here. The first one at the top here in the middle is a manufacturer company. They had a legacy network and they had legacy technology. They knew they needed to get into this IoT world and enable all their devices to be able to talk to each other. They were challenged with that real-time analytics of what their equipment was doing, along with their supply chain, right? So these folks had to take raw materials, turn that into finished products, and then ship it. That logistics was a giant mess, and being able to have a NAS solution that scales from edge to cloud, and even have on-site IoT and analytics and edge compute, help them better control that and get a better handle on their full supply chain line. The next we've got here is a large retailer in the US, and they also struggle with an outdated WAN solution set. And they had three particular problems that were really challenging them. One is their point of sales, right? All these folks are in their point of sales is their lifeline. If they're down, they're not selling products and services. And they've got to make sure that they have that rock solid communication up, along with their inventory management to make sure that they've got the right products on the shelf. So that was one piece of it. The second was their pharmacy, right? Their pharmacy is kind of a separate business, a lot more security there. You've got all the HIPAA restrictions and requirements, the privacy pieces. So they had to keep that network a little bit separate. And then on the third piece is their guest Wi-Fi. And they had to keep that definitely separate from everything else as well. But they still wanted a holistic view of all of their wired wireline, different services, and how are they working and interacting, and really get a handle on their trouble tickets. That was one of the challenging things. They didn't know when a store was going to go down and for how long. So they appreciated how we were able to bucketize some of their sites and be able to give them a more predictive model and SLAs. We'll talk about SLAs in a second. That was really key of how we flipped the SLAs on their head with customers and really changed it from a telco perspective looking out to a customer lens facing in. This last customer is a large financial institution. Actually, one last piece on this retail component. I like you to buy all my products and services, right? I think it's a better stack, the synergies I mentioned. But sometimes a customer either already has a solution set, maybe for security, the way this customer did, or some other pieces. So they said, hey, we're not going with you for the security part, but we love your portal, we love the experience. Can you ingest this data? And the way we built the portal, that modularity, the APIs in there was, sure, no problem. Worked on a few APIs, we connected, and now their security, even though it's being provided by a separate provider, is fully integrated into their portal view as well. And they use our portal versus their security supplier portal. So I really like that story with customers. This last one here is a financial institution, and the same thing. They've got everything from remote ATMs at pop-up events all the way through large financial trading centers. And their challenge was being able to get those site types correct. So they really appreciated how we developed the site types for them to be able to mix and match and move around and have that level of agility. And then they also needed, of course, rock solid communication, rock solid security, and tying back into their data compliancy and privacy rules. And also bandwidth, right? They need to make sure that if they needed extra bandwidth, certain areas are able to spin that up or spin that down for particular events. So each one of these was a little bit of a nuance of NAS, but they were all within this NAS framework that allowed them to have that visibility and control of the network that they're really, really looking for. One of the things I see here, though, that's still holding back some of the NAS adoption with this is interoperability, right? That's some of the challenges we still have. And that's where I think really in being able to develop these solutions, the north-south is, although challenging, is much easier. But that east-west communication, right, amongst carriers is very difficult, which is why I really appreciate the LSO efforts that MEF is doing here. We really need to double down here, right, and really work together to make sure we can extend that borderless customer experience. So I mentioned in the past early on about some of the Sonnet TDM days. We need to get back to that, to be able to interop. It doesn't matter whether our customer's first, middle, last mile to be able to interconnect. Now, I already know there's some naysayers. Last year I was on the panel and somebody brought it up and said, well, Paul, that's gonna take away our uniqueness, right? Our value proposition. We can't just have the same product. And I said, well, not really, right? The interop gives us the reach, the breadth and depth, and the telemetry to be able to honor these services. But what sets us all apart in this room here are several things. One, our go-to-market. How we attack the market, the customer base that we go after, how we sell the solution set and describe it. And then on the backside, it's really your whole entire service wrapper, right? That's what makes us unique. How you service that customer, how you have that day zero, that day one turn up, the day two support, the tuning of the network. I'm sure you've all heard the nightmare stories of some of the SD-WAN deployments early on where they turn it up and then it took them months and months to tune the situation. That's where we can lean in as well. And then embedding these application visibility controls from SD-WAN and security into the core infrastructure itself and selling them back out as a service to customers versus a bolt-on solution really resonates. So that's where we can really make up together. And I want to make sure that we're working together with LSO, right, and those east-west pieces to be able to really accelerate and partner together on some of these solutions. So let's talk a little bit about AI. So I talked about our portal pieces for a bit. And there's different levels of AI, and I know there's a lot of hype. I mean, several years ago, I couldn't go anywhere without hearing about SD-WAN, then it was SASE, and now everybody's talking AI, right? But let's, we'll talk about LLMs, large language models, and Gen AI in a minute, but I want to focus on just basic machine learning. It's been around for years, but that's the AI ops you can embed in the portals, and we have that today. And I'll pick on, kind of a boring use case, but it's easy. I was talking to some folks today about this here, about these bandwidth almost full. So we've seen these things for years. You have these circuits, you set your thresholds, right? Customer comes in and all of a sudden they spike for a second and now they've got a bunch of alerts on circuits. They've got a page, right? They've got a text, they've got an email, something. And now the customers have to spend all day long figuring out why these things hit their inflection point and where it's gonna come back. But when you take the machine learning pieces, we can take predictiveness into it. We look at time of day, we look at days of the year, we look at what the customer is doing, and we can give them an actual intelligence and an alert with an agent that says, by the way, you are going to hit the saturation point in 6 hours, 6 days, 6 months, right? And it gives them a choice that says, when this happens, you have a choice. Do you want to go ahead and take more bandwidth? If so, click a little button here and monetize this piece, and we can open up that bandwidth for that situation. Now you don't have to worry that you're not going to have that there. So that's some of the things that we can do with even just basic ML. Server characterizations are things to find out that there's server anomalies, all kinds of things that are there. But now as we go into LLMs, at first I was a bit skeptical seeing some of the demos, but what really sold me was a use case that our team brought to me. And what I really enjoyed about it was the thoughtfulness. And they showed me a natural query LLM from a customer in our portal that can go in there and ask a specific question about their network. And it understands natural language and is able to come back and realize that the customer query generated a novel graph that didn't exist today in the portal. No one asked it. We didn't think about it. We think we're pretty smart in product, but we didn't, and it came out. So now it generates the graph for the customer. And it says, by the way, do you want to pin this to your dashboard? So the customers can take a question and really now service their dashboard. Now, the way we built it, in parallel, it sends an alert to the product manager and says, hey, by the way, customer figured out something that you didn't. Take a look at the format, not the actual data that's inside from the customer, but the format and the structure. Do you want to now add this to your portal so that other customers in their repository of widgets can use this as well? Right? So that's this iterative aspect, and that's just the first beginning parts of this. We get really excited about the other art of possible pieces, and we use these already in our chatbots for sales. Sales can ask questions, not having to go to a website. Customers can ask questions about their products, and it comes up in the portal. But to really get the next layer and the next step of these AI-powered solution sets, you got to have strategic partnerships with people, right? With your vendors, with other folks that are out there. One thing you're going to need too is your network has to already be programmable. You have to have those APIs so you can manipulate and change the network up and down. And then, of course, we're going to need, for others talk about it today, that giant, massive data, right? We've got 400 gig where people are asking for hundreds of these 400 gigs. They want 800 gig and beyond. And some customers aren't even satisfied with that. They want pure dark fiber, which is another play to get into these data centers as well for some of these cloud service providers and hyperscalers. So we're working on all those levers, and then we're tying in, I heard someone mention already earlier on the panel about the graphical compute pieces. We've got to make sure that we've got that compute at the edge as well, because some customers and their applications won't take the latency that goes all the way over and across to the cloud and back, so we have to have that close by. Now, as you build these pieces, what you're going to find out is you're going to need a lot of stuff, right? There is large data lakes. So we had to build some seriously large data lakes. I'm talking petabytes and beyond of data, because if you're doing this right, you're ingesting data from everything, telemetry from every device, internal network pieces, APIs from other portals, everything together. And then you're going to need some pretty good data scientists, and they're not cheap, right, to then sit and work with your network and security folks to take that massive amounts of just pure data, enrich it, and turn it into actionable information. And the data scientists can do the power, but they're going to need to work with your technology, your folks, your security, and your network folks to be able to understand and manipulate and do the so what's with that data to give outcomes for the portal itself. So make sure you've got those pieces. What really then ties it all together for the customers is that portal experience, right? The unification of the services. And then we'll talk just a little bit here. I mentioned the SLA piece, and that'll be on this next slide here, is really pulling it all together. I'll hit the SLAs first, because I get up and I used to work for a company a while back, and my colleagues are there, and we had a sales conference once, and I bring up SLAs, right, in front of these salespeople, and they're like, oh my God, you're just gonna bring everything down, Paul, it's boring SLAs. But SLAs aren't boring, right? Customers kind of, don't like them, and I mean they don't like them, and they look at the SLAs and they say, this payout's horrible, right? It's a fraction of a percent. It's never gonna pay for my downtime here. I need better SLAs. So by flipping them around and turning them into a customer outcome-based SLA, right? So the way we do it is, if you buy our solution that ends in a device on your site, our SLA extends to the drop port of that service, not just the links inside. I mean, you still get SLAs on that, but your availability of your service is your key SLA. Can your users use that service, right? And that really turns us into XLAs, these experience level agreements that customers are looking for about their applications, their visibility and control, and they've got to be pretty stringent. The customers want the SLAs to be painful to the provider and the operator so that the operator does whatever they can to not inflict that SLA argument, right? The other thing you need to do too is, and some people are doing it yet, and not everybody, is proactive SLAs. As you see and you find out that you made a mistake, be honest with your customer, show it in the portal, make sure they understand it, and automatically pay them out, no arguments. Right? That really resonates with customers, that trust that they want to build. If you think about it with this ecosystem, you're going from edge to cloud. That scares a lot of people, right? Saying, I'm putting all of my eggs in one basket, one provider. But if you can prove to them that you're going to be there, you're going to stand up, and when you trip, we all trip, you're going to get up with them and make sure that they're whole and their service is restored as quickly as possible. That gives them more of a peace of mind, right? So one thing I want to make sure we bring home here is that, we want to leverage these MEF standards, as I said, reach across the aisle, make sure we're interoperating together for these services. Make sure that as you build your portals and your experience, that customer centricity comes through, that they see it through their lens, not our lens going back out the way traditionally we've done in telecom. Flexible contracting has to be key. They're used to it from all these SaaS providers and the folks that are out there. And then that digital first experience with the portal, as I mentioned, being able to see the holistic components, being able to buy, ask questions and services all there, and then tying that all with that service wrapper and the AI and ML that we mentioned really brings it home for customers. So thank you very much for your time today. I know I'm between you and lunch, so we ended just a few minutes early, so you guys, I know you're hungry, so thank you, take care, and enjoy the show.